Alright, so here's the last lecture for Chapter 1. In this section, we now focus on the actual world of biology, the study of the living world. In sections 1.1 and 1.2, we talked more so about science and how science approaches the world and uses the scientific method to question things around us. Now, again, we're focusing on just the living world. So how did life come to be? There's a couple of hypotheses as to how life came to be. The first hypothesis that we're going to look at is called spontaneous generation, that life came from non-living matter. So in spontaneous generation, they're saying that life came from the rocks, the water, the minerals from the earth, and things like that. Through much studies and research, it was determined that this hypothesis is not true. The second hypothesis is called biogenesis. Like produces like, or in other words, life comes from life. So living things come from other living things. Naturally, after much studies, this hypothesis of biogenesis was proven to be true. So therefore, it can be determined that all living things come from other living things. So how do we actually know then if something is living or non-living? There are 8 basic characteristics that every living thing must have. The first characteristic is that all living things are made of cells. That's why they refer to cells as being the basic units of life. The second characteristic is that all living things must be able to reproduce. There's 2 forms of reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves 2 parents, and it's a mixture of their genetics that are coming together. And then there's asexual, where there's only 1 parent. Asexual produces an exact clone of the parent in the offspring. The third characteristic, all living things must contain DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is located in the nucleus of your cells, and it's basically a blueprint of all of the genetic characteristics that you possess in your genetic pool. The fourth characteristic, all living things must be able to grow and develop. Now note the difference here between growing and developing. Growing means to change in size. Developing means to change in shape. The fifth characteristic, all living things need materials and energy. Where do we get the materials that we need? From the food that we eat. And the food that we eat is broken down by our metabolism. It's a set of chemical reactions that help to build the food up or break it down into energy. The sixth characteristic, all living things must respond to the environment. You respond to the environment every single time you shiver or you sweat. When you shiver, it means that you are responding to the coldness in the environment, so your body shivers or moves to keep you warm. Whenever you sweat, you're responding to the hot of the environment because you need the sweating to cool you down. The seventh characteristic, all living things must be able to maintain their internal balance, also known as homeostasis. Things come in, things go out. It's an equal balance of movement. So everybody has their own unique set of perfect conditions inside their bodies. Sometimes this gets out of whack because of stress, emotional trauma. Anything from the outside can definitely affect your homeostasis, but you must always have the ability to equalize that balance. And the last and final characteristic is evolution. Populations must be able to change over time. So keep in mind, whenever you want to try to find out if something is classified as being living or non-living, go through a checklist of all 8 characteristics. If the object has all 8 of the characteristics, they are classified as a living thing. If not, then it's safe to say that they are non-living. Okay, so now that you know the 8 characteristics of life, try to figure out if the objects pictured here in the slide are either living or non-living. And finally, it wouldn't be science if we didn't have to organize something. So we have to try to group every single particle, every single molecule, every single cell into some sort of classification system to make it easier for ourselves to look at things on a hierarchy. So here we are starting with the smallest level. Smallest level is an atom. If you have a group of atoms, which is most likely going to happen, you will then have what is known as. So a group of atoms creates a molecule. A molecule, once again, is 2 or more atoms that are joined together. Water is a perfect example of a molecule. It's made of hydrogen and oxygen atoms. A group of molecules makes up cells. A group of cells makes up tissues. A group of tissues makes up organs. A group of organs makes up the organ systems. A group of organ systems, the organism. A group of organisms of the same kind is called a population. Keep in mind, it has to be of the same kind. A group of populations living create a community. A group of these create up the whole ecosystem, and this includes non-living surroundings like the trees, the grass, the rocks, and the air. And the largest level of organization that contains all of the ecosystems or a group of ecosystems is called the biosphere.